The San Diego City Council continues to fund the temporary tent shelters to the tune of more than $8 million. And think dockless scooters are dangerous? Well, one company is working to make them safer for riders and those who share the roadways with them.
Many of you may be wondering, why do I want to go to the moon? What do I want to do there?
And a Japanese billionaire on a special mission to the moon. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Jade Hindman. Well, today the San Diego City Council approved an extension of the city's tent program. It's sheltering about 700 homeless right now, and KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says the 3 shelters will be funded through the end of June.
The extension of the tent shelters will cost the city about $8.5 million. All that money is coming from funds that were previously earmarked for permanent affordable housing projects. The tents are meant to give people experiencing homelessness a safe and clean place to stay while they wait for a permanent housing subsidy. But there's an acute shortage of resources in San Diego, meaning most tent residents will likely not find their way out of homelessness anytime soon. Mayor Kevin Faulconer says that's why the shelters have to stay open.
And tonight, nearly 700 people will be sleeping under a roof at the shelters rather than under a tarp on the street.
Councilman David Alvarez was again the only no vote. He says the city has more than 1,000 affordable low-income homes waiting to be built. All they need is money.
And if we keep using the funds that are meant to build this housing, we're actually never going to be able to fund these projects. And so this has to be incorporated into that holistic approach, whatever that becomes.
The debate over how or whether to keep funding these tent shelters will likely kick back into gear next spring. That's the city's budget season, when homeless services compete against libraries, police, road repair, and all the other city's services the city doesn't have enough money to fund. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Andrew, thanks. One dockless scooter company is working with the city of San Diego to go after unsafe riders. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says it's using brand new technology to do it.
You see them riding around on sidewalks, but electric scooters aren't supposed to be there. And riders are supposed to wear helmets, but most people in San Diego don't. To go after unsafe riders, scooter company Bird is partnering with the city of San Diego to share data about riding habits. Bird says people can also start reporting dangerous riders.
Flag riders who violate our safe riding policies and allow us to remind those riders to follow all the rules of the road, and will allow us to take any further actions necessary against repeat offenders, including removing them from the platform.
Councilmember Chris Ward says technology is key to making sure scooters are safer for everyone.
Well, one thing, for example, we're trying to work with the company so that if we had an area, say the boardwalk, where the maximum speed limit for bicycles is 8 miles an hour, when a scooter enters that area and it's always being tracked by GPS, can the scooter maximum speed lower to 8 miles an hour? That would be a great outcome, and this is where technology can provide solutions.
Ward also mentioned the idea of technology that can sense when someone's riding somewhere they're not supposed to be.
Can we make sure that if you're going down a sidewalk and you're going bump, bump, bump because you hit everything in the sidewalk, that the scooter knows you're on a sidewalk and really compels you, get off the sidewalk.
Aside from technology, San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer is looking at other ways to address the scooters. A spokesman says the mayor's office is working with the city attorney and council members to come up with rules that promote safety and rider responsibility. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
To education now, complex and irrational were 2 of the words used to describe California's education system in a 2007 report. A decade later, KPBS education reporter Megan Burke says a follow-up to that report paints a rosier picture and a roadmap for California's next governor.
In the report, researchers across the country say the local control funding formula passed under Governor Jerry Brown has put California's schools on the right track. In a nutshell, it streamlined school funding and gave districts more control in spending it. Students are improving under the model, but achievement gaps persist. San Diego State professor Jennifer Imazeki was a researcher on the project and has this message for the next governor.
What these studies are really saying is lots of good stuff. Don't throw out the good stuff. And there, you know, we need to give it time, and we need to make sure that folks are supported to take full advantage of the changes that have been made before we start changing other things.
California will elect a new governor in November. The report says he'll inherit a system still underfunded by $22 billion. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
Megan, thanks. The San Diego River Park Foundation Board, which works to protect and improve the river, decided not to endorse the SDSU West redevelopment plan for the Mission Valley Stadium site. There are two competing plans for the site. Both include the development of a river park. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has more.
The November ballot initiative asks voters to approve the sale of about 132 acres of city-owned land to San Diego State University. The idea is to allow the school to build an auxiliary campus in Mission Valley, where SDCCU Stadium and its parking lot now sit. SDSU has already unveiled conceptual drawings showing where they would build a stadium, housing, commercial space, and a river park. 2 weeks ago, the River Park Foundation's board voted to oppose the Soccer City ballot measure, which is also seeking to redevelop the Mission Valley Stadium site. The Foundation Board concluded that that initiative met their requirements for a river park, but lacked guarantees about when it would be built. Two River Park Foundation board members, Jack McGrory and Tom Sudbury, are funding efforts to get support for SDSU West and defeat Soccer City. Both voted on the decision to oppose the Soccer City project. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
And KPBS is a service of San Diego State University. All right, the race to replace Republican Darrell Issa in the 49th Congressional District is one of a handful of races in California that Democrats hope to win in their bid to gain control of the House. Now, the district covers San Diego's north coastal communities from La Jolla to Camp Pendleton and includes parts of Orange County. In our series of interviews with candidates running for office, Allison St. John spoke with Democrat Mike Levin, who is running against Republican Diane Harkey for that seat.
This is a district that is predominantly Republican, at least certainly in Orange County it is, perhaps not so much in San Diego. So how are you going to appeal to the Republicans in this district?
Well, what happened in the primary on June 5th was that when you add up the votes for the four Democratic candidates, we collectively received 51.5% of the vote. And the way we were able to do that is by winning, a vast number of the Democrats that were voting, but also 60+% of the declined estates and no party preference voters. So I'm going to do everything I can to connect with them. They know where I stand on environmental policy for a cleaner environment, clean air, clean water. They know where I stand on gun violence prevention, on reproductive rights. And I think if we can connect particularly with those independent voters, many of whom are not pleased with the direction things are heading in Washington, we're going to do very well on November 6th.
The health care bill, of course, that is one of the top issues for many of the voters. However, an Urban Institute study says that Bernie Sanders' proposal would increase federal spending by $32 trillion over 10 years. So how would you have the government pay for it?
Well, we have to protect the Affordable Care Act. That's the law of the land right now, and that's what I'm committed to doing first and foremost. And what's happening with the Republican Party and with Trump is that consistent undermining of the Affordable Care Act. And I see it all, my travels throughout this district. I speak with so many people who are one medical emergency away from not being able to pay their rent. And we've got to do all we can to ensure quality and affordable care for everyone. That'll be our first order of business on the path towards universal coverage, which I also see as one of the great moral issues of our time. We've got to do everything we can to fight for coverage for those with pre-existing conditions and for mental health care and women's health care. My Republican opponent voted 5 times in the California legislature, 5 times, Allison, against covering those with pre-existing conditions. That's not the type of representation that we need in Washington.
Would you be willing to raise taxes to pay for it?
Well, I think we've got to look at a variety of options, but what I would do is I would look at the irresponsible tax cuts that this administration passed that really go to those at the very top. And I would wonder, what are our priorities? Do we need tax cuts for people who really don't need them, or do we need to take care of people's health care? Do we need to take care of our infrastructure? Do we need to shore up Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, or are we going to allow a growing gap between haves and have-nots? I'm committed to fighting for everyone in the 49th District, not just those at the top.
Now, you are an environmental attorney, and many coastal residents care a lot about the environment, the beaches, the ocean. And one of the issues in your district is the San Onofre nuclear power plant, where spent radioactive fuel is being stored on site. That is one of the issues in your district that is a really tough nut to tackle. Do you have any plans for how you would go about that?
Well, I want to roll up my sleeves from the very first day and hit the ground running, working with the local, state, and national community leaders, environmental leaders, and others to really figure out a solution to get that waste off the coast. I think it's the critical local issue in this campaign. And I've been working with a working group of folks, really understanding the consensus around the need to move the waste off the coast. You've got 1,600 tons of radioactive waste, and it's 100 feet away from the ocean. Given the volatility of the water table, given the rising sea levels, given that there are 2 active earthquake faults and a whole variety of inactive earthquake faults, we've got to get the waste off the coast. So right now, we've got to look at a variety of options.
Have you heard of any that seem more likely than others?
Well, there's an issue of transportation. And then there's an issue of consent. If you send it to another state, you want to make sure that you have a consenting partner from an environmental justice perspective. And then there's also an issue of permanent storage, making sure that we can have a safe permanent repository. I know is something that the folks in Washington, whether it's the National Resources Defense Council, the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, they are all committed to a long-term permanent solution, not just for the waste at San Onofre, but for across the country, all those dozens of similar sites. Now, ours is particularly daunting, given that it's right next to the Pacific Ocean and that you have high population density, that you have earthquake faults and the rest. We have to do everything we can to move it off the coast. I'm committed to doing it, and frankly, I don't see a plan on the other side.
Your opponent talks a lot about appealing to biomed, biotech industry, which is very strong here in San Diego. Anything you could say to woo them over?
Well, all I would say is that her party had a budget proposal, Trump, to gut funding from the NIH and the DOE and other important research and development that we need here in our district. I am committed to growing the clean energy economy, the biotech and life sciences industries, the innovation economy that is the lifeblood of our economic development here in our region. We've got an incredible university in the 49th in UC San Diego. I'm committed to working with them to do everything we can to partner our workforce with the needs of our local companies. I know that we have to skate, as Wayne Gretzky used to say, skate where the puck is going to be, not where it is today. So I want to do everything we can at the federal level to position our region and our district to be at the forefront of economic growth in the key innovation economy industries of the future, like biotechnology, life sciences, clean energy, IT. I know we can do it here in the 49th.
Mike Levin, Democratic candidate for the 49th Congressional District. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Allison.
Now, Levin's opponent, Diane Harkey, declined our request to be interviewed. From in-depth features to candidate interviews, our election coverage continues on air and online at kpbs.org. Some people who suffer from chronic pain say they've been left behind in the war on opioid addiction. Dozens of people protested at the state capitol today, demanding that the government relax laws that are currently limiting prescriptions for opioid medications like Vicodin and Norco. The protesters say people with chronic pain are being treated like criminals and can't get the medications they need to function daily.
Well, it's getting very, very hard for patients that really need medication that's proven safe for them and that they take responsibly. It's getting harder and harder every day for them to get that medication.
Now, protesters say the government is misrepresenting the number of people who have died from opioid overdoses and that most opioid deaths are caused by illegal drugs like heroin and cocaine. SeaWorld will shell out $5 million to settle a fraud probe connected to the Blackfish documentary. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced the settlements today. The SEC alleged that SeaWorld misled investors about the negative impact from the 2013 documentary. The film blasted the park for its treatment of orcas. The company saw declining stock prices and attendance after the movie's release. Conservation officials in Tanzania say a rhino born and raised in San Diego is doing well in the animal's new African home. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
It took keepers 68 hours to move Eric the rhino from San Diego to his new home on a preserve on the western edge of the Serengeti. The aircraft touched down with a large crate carrying the 2,500-pound rhino almost 3 days after the animal left San Diego. Eric was finally unloaded after the sun went down. The reserve spokeswoman, Beezy Burden, says the 8-year-old bull spent his first few days inside a small enclosure but has since been let out in a larger pen.
With a move this big, this long, and taking an animal from one environment into a new environment, you have to be prepared for things to go wrong. But we were extremely lucky and grateful that they didn't, and the team came together really well.
Eric was born at the San Diego Zoo Safari Park back in 2010. This is footage of him with his mother shortly after his birth. Eric was brought to Africa to breed with other eastern black rhinos because there are fewer than 800 of the critically endangered rhinos left alive. There is hope that he will help establish a herd in the western Serengeti. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Eric, thanks. Here back in San Diego, a 10-year-old female rhino is pregnant. The San Diego Zoo says she's the second Southern White Rhino to become pregnant this year. The zoo is artificially inseminating the species to help with ongoing research to help pull their closest relative, the Northern White Rhino, from the brink of extinction.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, questions surround Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh's prospects for confirmation. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
All right, dry weather and plenty of sunshine is expected around the county this week. Erin Calandra has tonight's full forecast.
Well, I hope you were able to enjoy your day today. The weather is pretty nice. Not much going on here across San Diego County. It is dry. We could use some rain. We are in a drought, but it is going to remain dry at least through this week. And that's how it looks for the big picture, too. Although we will have a bit of moisture creeping into Arizona and New Mexico. They could see a couple of storms tonight and tomorrow. That is certainly not going to reach us. So for tonight, Mount Laguna staying dry and clear at 53 and Ramona around 49. Along the coast, you'll notice clouds building throughout the night, but by the morning time, they'll still be there. It'll clear out, though. We'll have sunshine. Oceanside reaching 60 for the low. Here in the metro, 64, partly cloudy skies. And look at this. We have a big dip in the jet stream. That's going to bring some cooler air down for places like Bakersfield, Fresno, and areas to the north. Not quite going to reach us, though. We might see a couple of degrees cooler, but nothing really significant. So San Diego sunny at 75 tomorrow, Chula Vista at 76, and Ramona reaching 87. Borrego Springs still in the 100s with blazing sunshine. We are still seeing flooding across the Carolinas because of Florence. So unfortunately, it's going to be a long recovery for them. They're still seeing some pop-up showers and storms, but really the big problem now is the river flooding. For late week, it's going to be dry out there. That's great. And for us, it's going to be very pleasant. Let's take a look at some of these temperatures along the coast, mainly in the 70s. And then by the weekend, up to those upper 70s with clear, sunny skies each day. Inland will be in those low 80s Wednesday, but then by the weekend again, jumping up to 87 with that beautiful sunshine. The mountains will stay in the 70s, the low 70s Friday and mid 70s by Sunday. And then in the deserts, it's going to be beautiful, a bit cooler Thursday and Friday. Jumping down to 98 degrees instead of 101. So that will be a bit of a cool down for them with lots of sunshine. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
Erin, thanks. A Japanese billionaire will be the first person to take a commercial trip around the moon. He'll be on a SpaceX Big Falcon rocket, or BFR for short. Yusako Maizawa says he plans to take a few guests along the journey.
In 2023, as the host, I'd like to invite 6 to 8 artists from around the world to join me on this mission to the moon. These artists will be asked to create something after they return to Earth. And these masterpieces will inspire the dreamer within all of us.
Maezawa is founder of Japan's largest retail website and is one of the country's richest people. SpaceX founder Elon Musk wouldn't specify how much he's paying for the ride, but says it's a lot. The BFR is still in development and will make several unmanned test launches before it takes on passengers. A new documentary focuses on a little-known group of pilots from the Vietnam War. It explores the history of a helicopter squadron that protected U.S. boats on the Making Delta. The Seawolves went on to become the most decorated squadron in naval aviation history. Here's filmmaker Jeff Arbaio and KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh talking about the scramble of the Seawolves.
Jeff Arbaio, writer, director, producer of Scramble, the Seawolves. Where did this idea come from?
Well, my father-in-law is a Seawolf, and that's how the whole thing really got started. I was over at my in-laws' house one day, and my father-in-law kept coming in the room. I was watching a football game or something, and he kept coming in and asking, I wish I could somehow have a memory of this thing that I'm going to. I wish I could record this thing that I'm going to, knowing that I'm a cinematographer and director and stuff. So my wife finally said, I think my dad wants you to go record this thing that he's doing. I said, oh, what is it? It's something with his Vietnam buddies. I said yes, and it was on the Midway. And we went and recorded it. And that's when I really found out who the Seawolves were. And it was a surprise for me to hear what these guys did. And I started to get a little bit more interested in them as I started to hear some of the stories, the guest speakers who were coming up.
All right. So, and we've got Don Thompson. He's a historian and pilot. He talks a little bit about their mission.
All these PBRs and swift boats and tango boats and all the different types. We had 1,000 boats down there. And they were constantly being ambushed. And they were always on the short end of the stick. They were going to lose the ambush, but we'd get a scramble. We'd usually be in the air in around 2 minutes. We'd usually be overhead in 5 and save the day because the Viet Cong either had to leave or die.
You describe this as a forgotten unit. Why is it forgotten? They obviously played a pretty major role here, and they were around for at least 5 years. Why are they forgotten?
Well, they were forgotten because they were commissioned and decommissioned in Vietnam. So they were put together there, disassembled there, and they were never in the United States, not even one day. So a lot of people didn't even know that they existed. And people in the Navy didn't even know that they existed, even today. Even today, a lot of people still don't know about these guys. And that's why this story is so important to get out there, because they really didn't get the recognition even when they came back and told people they were in Vietnam and told them what they did.
And actually, I want to play another clip. This is from Jim Armistead. He was a door gunner.
I don't ever remember being afraid. Been on many SEAL insertions, been on many a gunfight. I don't ever remember being afraid at the time, but I do remember going back to my bunk and laying in my bed and going, oh my God, I am so lucky to be alive.
So that's Jim Armistead. So how well are these guys dealing with the trauma of their service, even all these years later?
Well, I think it's different for each individual. Some of the guys, I think from what I discovered doing the interviews and what my wife had discovered doing the interviews is that if they were in the military for a long time, if they were in the Navy for a long period, they seem to deal with it better. The guys who were there for 1 year or 2 years and did the battles and then just came home, and it was like they went into these battles and then came home and it just stopped. They had a hard time, I believe, and the guys that were in it for a longer period, they were able to cope with it better.
It took you 4 years to produce this film. These guys were only around for 5 years. So what's your takeaway from their service? I mean, how significant? Honestly, when I saw the film, I thought more about, oh, the Army did a lot of this. They did like the Apocalypse Now and the Air Cavalry. What's your takeaway?
Well, the Army actually did even start with these guys, and this was in the Mekong Delta. So the important part of this is that a lot of people, they think of Vietnam right away. They're thinking jungle, heavy bush and stuff. And these guys were in the Mekong Delta, which doesn't get talked about a whole lot. And they were considered the brown water Navy. You had the, PBRs, which are the river patrol boats. And they would go into these canals and get ambushed, and the Seawolves would go in and save them. And so because of their quick, rapid reaction, they started to take over. When the Army started it, the Navy kind of came in and took over because they were instrument trained. They would fly at night. They would fly in any kind of weather. And that's why the Navy ended up taking over, because it was Navy.
So they ended up taking a lot of the heat, though they didn't get much of the credit.
That's true.
Jeff Arbayu, great film. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And you can catch Scramble the Seawolves tonight at 9 o'clock right here on KPBS. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, protecting marine mammals. The worries over a U.S. Navy plan to shield wildlife in the middle of ocean training grounds off the Southern California coast. And on Midday Edition, the immigrant story in San Diego. A new multimedia project tracks the numbers and personal stories of 60 immigrants who call this place home. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening, everyone.